Morning, people. Might be in line, I think, and online. Welcome back after a week of leisure and pleasure. I hope. No. So let's move on with the material. I put on my USB key the midterm if you're interested. I'd say that my reaction to it is that pretty much on the money. You guys seem to be on board with the material I've been teaching, and that's what you got to do for the final deliver. So I tried to make the question as straightforward as possible. I usually make them short, as you can see, not many paragraphs, to the point. And that's all the material that I'd like you to leave the course with, basically. You have to be in an interview, you have to be able to discuss ecological concepts just as good as specific cases. We're dealing with the material wildlife management that is very broad. I keep saying that. So I'm going to be humble about it. There is no wildlife manager that knows it all. No wildlife manager that can do moose and koala at the same time. So all kinds of perspectives on it. So the course is an eye opener. Trying to consolidate. We've been consolidating what the basic principles behind it. And then that means that should help you read into what Greenpeace has to say about population growth, survival, reproduction, and so on, all the biological phenomena that's at the basis of the problem that we have. I keep calling it a problem, whether it's saving a koala, whether it's getting rid of a nuisance animal, it's still a problem. That means that it requires action. Otherwise, you lose your job. If every animal would have no interaction whatsoever with you, if you would allow the moose to walk in this room, for example, without any problem, then we wouldn't be talking. So really, it's about the different issues. So my goal is to boil it down to something that's a little structured. Try to keep it simple as much as possible. So organize the information that we have coming from all sources. I can't read on the Prime Minister saying something because I'm not in politics, for example. So I got to rely back into science, for example, which is what I'm going to try to do here. All right. So definitely a definite emphasis on the biological aspect of it, guaranteed. Am I still on track? Very close happening. So, I'm trying to break the ice here on where we were, what we're doing. So we're not moving up in the chapters. We all know that, right? We're going to finish with chapter 0, bad start. Chapter 1A, 1B. This is all cumulative material that, if for any reason, if I wanted to test you guys on the pre-midterm, I would. Keep in mind, of course, I'd rather focus on the new material that we're going to be seeing from now on, especially that the midterm has been, as far as I'm concerned, very successful. Talking about the midterm, I wanted to say that there's a question that threw everybody off, and you guys are so to the point. The multiple choice. Let's see if you guys have tendency. The natural tendency for animals to stick together versus keeping apart. Multiple choice question. Anybody remembers this question? we said I was wrong, so when we said, oh, none of the above, and I was suggesting there was a whole options per term. Two terms that describe tendency for animals to stick together like we are now. What are you gonna talk about?
Dilution effect.
I know. Yeah, thank you very much. So keeping together is cohesion. So always cohesive forces. There's very few animals who can breathe if they're totally alone in the world and avoid every specific. So obviously, once the population is at least two animals would help. It certainly male, female, and fertile as well. So therefore, you need more than two individuals together. So there needs to be cohesion. I recognize the brown bear is part of my group. Therefore, I'm interested in what he's doing. I mean, I might share something and strategize with that one specific. We do the same thing with our own. If you had this class that was not the gorilla, you have a different perspective on how to interact with someone. So it's not specific break. And what's the opposite then? What is, apart from COVID, what is it that keeps us more like 2 meters apart? Apart from COVID, bad children. How about the private space? How about vital space? How about I need room? Give me some room. Stop looking over my shoulder. Yeah, so that's antagonism. And my first question. And then collision. Everybody here was bright enough to say. I was saying that keeping together was antagonism. Who are they? So that question, the way I do it for the odd case, just cancel the question. You keep your points, the totals accumulated so far, and then the question becomes on these or the exam is on 50 points. This is the way I can see this. The problem has been tried again. Try to be creative. Doesn't work. All right, so I hope you were happy with the midterm. I hope it's taking you somewhere. You know that again, you were to leave the class tomorrow, go to an interview, at least you got something to talk about. What I mentioned involves some basic ecological concepts. Keep in mind that if you're from a biology program, this is a component that you're most likely to bring. You're not going to sign forms. You're not going to do politics. You could do some lobby eventually if you have a loud mouth of some sort. Take your mask out and start shouting, and then Greenpeace will like you. But you still you're bringing the science credibility to the table when it comes to talking to the assistant prime minister. All right. And that makes decisions on something so picky you wouldn't believe, and I'm sure you're familiar with that stuff. For hunting season, it's whether it has to open this date or this date, and sometimes it's a week, and then Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources will post it loud and clear that major change in the regulations. We just opened the hunting season, for example, 3 days early or 3 days late. Millions of dollars involved. Ammunition, lodge reservations, everything depends on that. That's millions of dollars. And you might not be part of it. I'm not a hunter myself. I just have to recognize that, first of all, the resource is there. If it tells me it doesn't have to be protected, therefore it can be sustainably harvested if there's users, people highly interested. So raise your hand. I mean, this is almost a racist question. Raise your hand if you have hunting history in your family somewhere. There you go. All right. So it's really part of the reality. Some people That's what they do. We sample in the bush, but people do like to take animals. They have a lot of respect, but we know the long story on how people value their hunting week, for example. Also about bonding and everything. So, but they need a reason, and camera won't do it because they want to bring back a piece, and sometimes it's trophy. I'm sorry to say, but in Washington State, in the mountains, people go after mountain goats for trophy animals. The venerable, the very venerable animals that have been spotted by the guide for 12 years, that male is still around. The horns are just spectacular. Big horn sheep, for example. All right, so again, this is not my round. I don't own a firearm, so, but I totally understand what people are doing, and I feel if I was hungry, I'd be inventing a firearm after 5-7 days. Pretty much, sure. Right, with firearms seems to be, to this day, the most humane way of taking down an animal. I've read it over and over again for different animals that we can cover in specifics. If I go through specific animals such as these ones. So that's the eye opener right here. Let's move on with the material. And again, you're boiling it down to what's material for the exam. The rest is your own information to see where you fit. I don't know if people are going to New Zealand in the next year. I don't know if people are staying away in Venezuela. Could be. But I like to take a world approach to wildlife management, not knowing that we could get a job in Australia tomorrow. That's not impossible at all. I keep forgetting about something I haven't addressed really. Is possibly the fact that there could be half of this class right here who's into vet science. Raise your hand quickly. Vet science. Anybody? No. Okay, I lose my diet Pepsi. It's not half. Still, wildlife management is a huge component of vet science. I'm sure as pre-vet people who have thought about it, guaranteed you can see the value of going into the microbiology, the pathology part of the animal conservation or population control. I tell diseases in the domestic species, but I can't think of a better example, but transmission is obviously epidemiology is absolutely important. So just to refresh our memories on what we find in the mammals, about 4,600 species. That's my my ballpark figure. So let me recap. Fish, we said in just the modern fish, 28,000 species. So maybe you want to write down this summary for you for the final exam. Fish were at minimum 28,000 plus. Saying plus, I mean really plus, that's absolutely minimal, but still it's way larger than amphibians. The hundreds of amphibians. In the reptiles, 1,000 is that, lots of lizards, lots of snakes. And then you get to birds, 8,000, very successful right now, so lots of wildlife in birds. And then mammals, not too shabby, 4,600. There was a time when there was only one model of mammals on this planet, and it was during T-Rex time. So as the sequel is coming up, there's going to be huge T-Rex that's being tickled by a little shrew about this size. So if you ever see shrews around your lawn, like I do, this is the model T of the mammal, the first model that wasn't either a bird or a reptile. Hair, and it had produced milk. It was a mammal, little thing like this. From there, you go to the blue whale. Wow, that's a jump. So there's a whole bunch in there. I'm not going to go into the biology, fundamental biology of mammals, but of course, this is useful for any wildlife manager. You need to know what the basic biology, biological functions of a given group. And I'm going large group because we gotta cover a whole bunch. Opossums are right here, so I skipped altogether, so my table starts with, I forgot the platypus and the two echidnae, so keep that in mind, that's optional, we're allowed skipping. Everybody's from New Zealand here, they're filming for it. I mean, pretty much the country. The platypus are so pretty spectacular animal that also requires management in terms of conservation, because you'll see at the end of this class that no matter what happens to the animals and no matter how much we use them, what we do is totally indirect. Our impact will be indirect. So that means that the next day you work on it, growing a tree, you're helping a whole bunch of animals, right? And the word, the keywords habitat. So question for the final. Among different factors, hunting, fishing, persecution, harassment, doing nothing to a species, what is the most severe that will be a habitat disruption? So then I'm opening the door for a three credit course on human ecology. Again, wildlife management deals with humans in the picture, no matter what. If there's no humans, there's no wildlife management, correct? So habitat destruction will remain, and that means that I haven't talked about it very much because it's very pervasive. That means I'm not targeting a given species, I'm just cutting down a tree, or I'm just building a new condo, or I'm filling a marsh. So suddenly I scrap the entire system. So therefore, it's every trophic level that's been impacted, including your gray wolf and the apex animal predators, for example. So we're going to talk about a bit about the different forms of mammals, and in the end, see again, just to finish that story, habitat will come chapter. If we're lucky, we're in chapter 2. Oh, I hope to get chapter 3. It's coming to a theater near you. So opossums, I put in, if you have to remember some for the exam, some groups. Definitely, the opossums are there are quite a few species. Of course, 99.9% are in Australia, so therefore, I know very little. I was born in Australia, I haven't worked, I haven't visited Australia. I will bet it's covered with opossums. Wherever there's I put cover. So gotta look at the setting, but of course, as a North American, I can't forget about the opossum because we found one that came from down south, say Windsor, Ontario, climbed into a motorhome and was driven to alive in Sudbury. So that thing is around, and the opossums are not pretty. They're just very prolific. They're very successful. They are commensal. Did I say commensal? That means that they tolerate human activity, no problem. They're just like a raccoon. They can, addicts, you're talking fairly invasive. All right. So this is the American opossum. Right. That's the name. Am I wrong? Virginia. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Virginia. One species out of a few hundred. So the group to remember, opossum. I hope to be able to make a short question, say 5 points of mix and match. In other words, 2 columns and associate the possibly the family names with the groups. All right. So just so you leave the course with a few families. I'm not doing it for all of them. I'm not going to push our luck too much. Fascicular of course, because of the swallow, you can't leave home without it. Notice all the groups that are, if people are into conservation, I suggest you go into these groups right here. Because if I didn't highlight them, it's because they're very secretive or very few. So you point to any of these groups, I mean, sorry, there's a, whenever you see a cross like this in the table, I mean, dead cemetery cross. That means thylacines are not, they're extinct right here. So I think it was a marsupial dog, if I'm not mistaken. So look at these. I mean, here's the Tasmanian devil, but I mean, apart from laughing about it, that we don't have much information. But of course, in Australia, it can be a serious problems. Keep in mind, these are marsupials that can be very numerous. Quickly, side question, why is Australia keeping so many marsupials that are not very efficient for reproduction? They can produce a lot, but they produce premature babies. Am I right about this? Yes, thank you. Marsupial, by definition, that's what they do. They give birth to premature babies, and that's usually not seen as a good condition, correct? Any doctor will tell you it's not good. Supposed to give birth at 40 weeks, to give birth at 26. No. And for kangaroos, all the marsupials, the newborn is totally helpless. You know that from having seen kangaroos. If they're a head and 2 legs, and that's it. They're not even there. The hind legs are not even there. So why is it that they're so numerous, if they're so weak compared to what's the other group? If they're not marsupial, anybody? What do you call them? Placental is good, placental group. So which is the success, right? I mean, if you among the 4,600, your marsupials will cover say 600-700 species. So what is a successful group on this planet right now for mammals? Certainly the placenta. Therefore, placental must have an advantage over marsupial, and that's the reproduction, correct? So the marsupial can't win over, technically cannot win over placentals. Marsupials are vulnerable because of their weak reproductive strategy. Their system is simple, but it's like what I call the Nemo syndrome, where you it's all kinds of bunch of helpless little babies, and they get all ripped, and marsupials do the same thing. I mean, mind you, there's a touch, so that and there's transport, so it's not too bad. But anyway, placentals are known to outcompete marsupials, generally speaking. So for wildlife management, that's rule number one. If you introduce any kind of placental mammals in an island covered with marsupials, your placenta will win. So right now I'm talking about, we'll talk about the domestic cats, the feral goats that outcompete kangaroos, feral dogs, feral weasels. People introduce weasels to get rid of some snakes, and so now the birds are going because of weasels. And they're having, I was gonna say they're having a ball, no, they're having a neck. All right, so koalas for sure. And then, of course, I don't know these groups too much. Of course, you know the names, you've seen them. I don't know the culture or the management. Of course, you can find somewhere on the web a local community that cares for the giant wombat. Ooh. Right. But otherwise, of course, the kangaroos, very important nuisance in many cases. They're pretty aggressive. They are major roadkill, as you have probably seen. Yeah. Therefore, management is a priority. You want to save a human life before you want to save a kangaroo. So therefore, you fence or you call a control, population control on some of these species. very crude summary of kangaroos. There's quite a few species. One of them is a tree kangaroo, if you have ever seen it before. Again, it's not what we're doing with the tree kangaroo. It's because we're taking its habitat away. So what's left for the tree kangaroo? Not so much. Therefore, suddenly same group, conservation issue. Could be the same for wallabies. The wallabies are typically smaller than kangaroos, so they might be easier to manage. Notice how I skipped the musky rat kangaroo. Never heard of it before. I always like to put all the information out for you guys. You're gonna have to pick for the exam species that question. You're going into that science conservation species. Which one would you pick? You'd have to pick one of those. I've highlighted the ones that are more documented because they're more numerous. It's really hard to document and 6. So I highlighted the ones that make the news, but the rest in black are all groups. For example, golden moles. Start a literature search on the golden moles. I don't think it's too. Of course, there's always the fact that many of these species are in the tropical regions that are underfunded for research. So you wait for National Geographic to show somewhere to make this study. Unfortunately. All right, so elephant shrews, not too much. Golden moles, aardvark. Everybody knows the name for having seen cartoons somewhere, but I don't know a thing about aardvark for any kind of management. There could be local issues for sure. The hyraxes are small little beasts from northern Africa. Elephants, of course, is big on the news for wildlife management. And of course, Lindsay, back from the reading, will tell me again and again, what is the major factor that drives our wildlife management? What is something about the animal? You got it, the CF, the cuteness factor, not the FF. Cuteness factor. Sorry to say, you can't help it. Discussion at the table, you can argue over politics and management all you want. If grandma said they're so cute, that you end of it and then you serve. Very important, we're very visual primates. We see in color, we see in 3D. The shapes, we detect the shapes and everything, very important in management decisions. So I'm gonna bring up just some cases I know better, for example, seals. They're so cute. So elephants, same thing, majestic, very important as well. So they make the news. They're quite tolerable, but at the same time, they can be a real nuisance because they're quite large. So they trample your corn overnight, you know that, right? So and they travel in herds. So if you get one elephant and you get 25 in your field, that's it for the season. Then you get into complex situations such as the ivory. While not every animal has ivory, this one does. Suddenly, every little bit of elephant around there is telling Jerry that he could be feeding his family for 2 straight years with just this one animal. Lots of money for these guys. I mean, rubles, but still, it's a lot of money. It's better than trading your old goat to an old cow. Pressure on these animals is extreme. Ways of capturing those animals is not difficult. The meat is more or less useless, not being used at least. So a real issue for elephants for sure. there's two species. The African elephant is the one with the bigger ivory tusks, but the Asian elephant's got its own story. If I say Asia, let's go racist again. The one big country in Asia, anybody? Starts with the C. China, like Trump would say, China. So, in management, world management, sorry, China will come over and over again, and it's not politics, it's not political, it's because they're very numerous Chinese. They can't help it, that's why they were born, but collectively, the impact is left and right. Habitat destruction, pollution, name it. So nothing against the Chinese, it's just something scientifically measurable that China will have overall major impact in many situations, including domestication of the Asian elephant. Lots of farmlands using elephants for different reasons and so on. The management becomes global. Another level of intervention. Everyone, Justin Trudeau, you go down to the farmer and you deal with dairy and with Mark, the next farmer, and that's management as well. So community actions is part of the jargon you will come up with at the final. So different levels of interactions, right? So community is just as important. You can get your wages from taking your Jeep or your car to different farmlands and discussing the coyote situation or whatever, right? Or elephant problems in Africa. The manatees, I'm gonna say conservation. So elephants is conservation, manatees conservation. I think you all seen a manatee before. Anybody wants to try? What's the situation with the manatees? And here I'm covering stuff I won't have time to cover in chapter 3 if we get there. Ever.
Manatees mostly eat seagrasses, and we're basically killing all of the seagrasses and ripping them up with our boats and whatnot.
Out of your little mind. What did you just say? That the manatees are killing the.
No, we are killing the manatees' food. They eat seagrasses, and people's boats and things rip up all the seagrass beds, and the pollution kills the
That's a
seagrass
good
beds.
one. That's a good one. See, if you didn't have your mask on, I would understand the first time. I hope I don't have to repeat this entire class. So yes, I was thinking more direct action such as lots of recreational boating down the Everglades, and people run them over. So with their boats, so these animals are being slashed quite a bit, but that's pretty interesting. I haven't seen the documentation of them, but I'm willing to. You're saying that possibly the boat pollution will kill the grasses.
Boat pollution and as well the motors just ripping it up in general.
Yeah, it's all shallow channels.
And that's why in the Everglades, when they're going around, they have the giant fans on top of the boats that are like the motor
Oh yeah,
in the water.
oh yeah. I know what they call.
Airboats.
They're called airboats. Yeah. They're trying to save their crop, not the weeds. So. All right, so documentation on manatees guaranteed. There's a university somewhere in Florida that's working on manatees that has a permanent program. And Dugong is more towards Eurasia, Asia, Indonesia. And therefore, that's documented. And again, lots of potential users. Indonesia, I mean, something I should do eventually. Chapter 2.B.C will come up with a summary of human densities in different jurisdictions. But I'd like to argue that it's now a world situation, so who cares? So if Indonesia's got an issue with animals, we're all pitching towards helping that situation, because now it's a world economy. So that's a possibility. we were the very territorial. Ontario would never ask Quebec for any kind of the directions or instructions or vice versa. And guaranteed, I mean, wildlife management now, certainly Ontario, Quebec, people have recognized that political jurisdiction is not the way to go. Your manager will not care whether it's in Louisiana or Alabama. Sloths and anteaters, very vulnerable, therefore conservation area, conservation issues for these animals. Sloth, I believe, is only 2 species, if I'm not mistaken, the 2-toed and the 3-toed, something like that. So, anteaters, a few more, but I don't know, very few species as well. So rare, rare thing. You have to admit with me that the shape is pretty unique. And so it's a cube. Got the right. So unique is also something that we sort of value, correct? If we lose the elephants, that's it, no more trunks ever, and stuff like that. So mammals have this way of being fascinating. Fish don't have it too much, from a tuna to the next perch, ooh, big deal. But mammals have worked their 24-hour metabolism to grow all kinds of funny years and individual recognition, and there's no one here that looks exactly the same. So between species, quite fascinating. From if I tell you that the whales come from the elephant, it's a stretch, but apparently this is the most likely evolutionary path of these animals. So mammals, a big, big topic in wildlife management. That's the point I'm trying to make. In other words, by default, there's probably 3/4 of your job that will involve a mammal rather than other species. Lots of species, and each of them is quite unique. So, and we'll get to groups that we don't care about so much. Primates are quite important, of course. Bonus question. And then you would say what she just came up with that bonus question. She's going to say something like, why are they called primates? Why are monkeys called primates? Exactly how I like it. So quiet. We'll stop breathing, or are you still breathing? So primates, because they're not second dates, because back in the Royal England, the kings decided to create, Darwin, and organize the animal world. I said, listen, Jerry, we're on the top of the world. We're the top machine. We're the only ones with the brain to communicate. We serve tea at 3:00. We're on the money. There's nothing compared to us, except possibly. And then the queen said, bring me a orangutan, and we'll try to see if it's a human. It qualifies. So in the 18th century, that's what they did. They had enough of a fleet to go to Indonesia, colonize, bring back some samples for the queen, and she brought back an orangutan, and apparently it's in writing. She tried to teach the orangutan proper manners. So I'll put a piece of sugar and a little stick. Didn't work. So, but nevertheless, we decided that all these animals are close enough to make them the first one, primate as the first one. So we're top of the world primate. Second dates are all the other ones. So second dates, that's an old classification. Just to all the other ones, like the reptiles, the birds, there's not so much like birds. They just seem imperfect. Second dates and then the tertiates were earthworms, for example. All right. So quite fascinating animals in the group of primates. Their biology is quite complex. We're now into placentals, yes, correct. So all the process of inside is now part of every placental member. So, and they have to create a little monkey at the end of a pregnancy. So parental care very high. You can write this down. So lots of parental care. They invented the sociobiology just for the monkey. Sociobiology is a field that covers the benefits of being together. Sociobiology is benefits of being together in order to achieve your fitness. Just like you're doing now, getting 3 credits to finish the program, to make more money, and have more babies kind of thing. Make a very quick story. Sorry, guys. All right, so very complex, fascinating as well. Probably the most visited in the zoos will be the monkeys. If you ask a young group to see which ones they want to see, it's probably the monkeys. So the 3D effect very important. The fact they swing, the way they move around. So the whole thing makes it very complex. You don't get tired of watching monkeys because it's not repetitive. Like in tigers, you've seen 5 growls and you're done. But in monkeys, they scratch this one, they scratch this one, they come back to this one, and then they clap their heads, and then the other one starts swinging endless. And that's what we do. That's what we inherited of that kind of shape where we try to do everything, including Captain Kirk flying in space. I follow the news just like you do. Lemurs are, you're going to say endangered because lemurs are very primitive primates and therefore they're very basic. They got the sociobiology, they got the locomotion, but they're very stuck to fruits. Fruits are in the tropics, therefore there's no lemurs in the Arctic. So that means they're restricted on this planet and they're very vulnerable. So the only place where you find them is on Madagascar. And then the future wildlife manager, you're going to start thinking about all landscape. What's around Madagascar? Water, I go left, water, I go down, water, more water. That's the matrix for lemurs. Their habitat is fine as long as we don't take it down. But they got nowhere to go. There's no connectivity with the land and float on the raft. That makes them more vulnerable to exception. You get the idea, right? So there's no incoming animals, there's no outcoming going animals, there's no inflow other than one island, Madagascar. That's true for Australia, that's true for every island. It's called insular biogeography. Insular or polyinsular insular. So the ecology of islands is totally different by this factor, the fact that it's a jail. Right. So big topic on lemurs for sure. National Geographic is all over that for sure. And the thing is, we're in the tropics. We're looking at a population, human population that's quite dense. I don't know about bird control, and let's not go there. So we don't know the population trend on Madagascar. But the reality is the forest doesn't grow as fast as it's being taken. Overexploitation of habitat takes the lemurs down, and that's my shortest statement on this. Lemurs. Habitat destruction for lemurs. Monkeys, apes have been persecuted. I'm going to use the word persecution because they were really, people were really fond of them. The market for gorilla hand used as an ashtray. Anybody? We'll take care. Apparently, so you gotta go back 50 years, but still, so this is what managers have been working against, is that kind of poaching attitude, very specific to, I mean, nobody wants another ashtray but a gorilla. Pretty sick. So same for orangutan, very vulnerable because it's an insular animal again, so it's stuck on an island, can't go anywhere, and hasn't never seen a predator. Very vulnerable as well. Rodents, something we changed topic because it says cosmopolitan, meaning ubiquitous, meaning all over the world, universal kind of deal. And extremely numerous. So write down that there's at least 2,100 species, 2,100 species. Yeah, put that in perspective. You said 4,600 total. 6,700 marsupials. That's a whole bunch. So I'm gonna say every second placental mammal is a rodent. So we could be spending a lot of time on the rodents. Anybody wants to try to name some rodents? That's on me.
Rat.
Not specific enough. Let's go specific. Yeah.
Norwegian brown rat.
Norwegian is good. Same as brown rat. You want to keep it simple. Same denomination.
Vancouver Island Marmot.
What?
Vancouver Island Marmot.
Oh, you're so fancy. Vancouver Island Marmot. Yeah, you gotta walk a little bit. You gotta get up early. To do that. Yeah. So most likely a subspecies, but did we say island again? Oh, a whole kind of worms right there. Insular biogeography again. This animal stuck on an island, and sure enough, special. There's a martin on the Vancouver Island, all kinds of subspecies. Nobody dares to try to see them. Anything else for rodents? I did come up with that. I knew it. Capybara is a good one. Yeah, of course. Spectacular. What's any opinion on capybara? Anybody? What does it do? Is it a good thing to have? Yeah, yeah. A lot as in almost
They're
too
real
much.
cute,
How
though.
much? Almost to it. Yeah. Hotel and grass, you know, in fact, these gardens and so on. So they're very much.
Or the flying fox.
The flying
Fox,
fox.
big rat.
Oh yeah, no, we're talking about it.
Isn't it?
We know all that. No. So I'm gonna say the typical one is most likely to be the brown rat for size. You're looking at 150 grams. Yeah, 150 grams for female, 250 for male. The same as the lab rats we have, same size. But, wow, and one for every human on this planet. Very commensal. That means it really benefits from our sewer. They're quite fascinating animals. Living in that environment that we provide. Through cement plastic, they swim into water to get into the houses. The toilets, yeah. No, there was something. So I'd like to say mouse as well. There's so many mice, it's crazy. And mouse typically is, say, 30 to 60 grams. But don't forget so from very small, say 20 grams, a deer mouse, full grown, full fed is 20 grams, and the capybara is probably the largest rodent. What's our largest rodent here?
No,
Beaver.
maybe. Oh, that's just a little bit.
No, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, I said it would probably be the beaver, and I said, oh, or maybe the porcupine. But I
Oh,
think
yeah, no,
porcupines just
no.
look bigger
Yeah.
because of the quills.
Beaver, before, so I've been going from the river, so. Muskrat, beaver, porcupine qualifies, the flying squirrels are, they count as well. So imagine all the diversity, extremely diverse. Every mammal book will tell you that the best way to summarize a rodent that is very successful in reproduction. That means opportunistic species, right? Is bound opportunistic species. Doesn't mean totally that doesn't depend on your addict. It will just use it. Opportunistic species. Rare conditions, they eat each other. If there are scarce conditions, scarce food, they'll eat each other. So they can be cannibalism occasionally. The males will certainly try to get to their own babies, stuff like that. But if the food is there, guaranteed, it's I've seen litters and mice, I've seen litters of 23, and that's the female being impregnated the night she's giving birth. So in between the babies, she receives the sperm of the male. The male after the female, she has an estrus at the time of delivery. So that's quick. Takes 30 days for the female to give birth. Again, it takes 15 days for the young to be independent. And suddenly the cycle goes again. So you can imagine population explosion. So I say overabundance might be a topic, overabundance. And of course, it's all in all modesty of saying that. Again, there's some possibly cases with the chinchilla up in the mountain, are very isolated, very compact. And we have the case of a isolated population such as the Vancouver Island marmot as well. All right. So it's just to make a quick summary, but lots of information on rodents for sure. Bats, topics we have on hand, certainly in the tropics, it's a nuisance, but though, I mean, they competed in fish, they got fish eating bats. Up north, I'm going to say conservation because we know we're at the northern limit of most bats in the world. No more northern than our bats. The cave strategy is essential, but it's vulnerable because we also use caves as therefore the conditions that depleted for little brown bats, for example. But I mentioned probably 7 or 8 species just in Ontario. And I really don't know about the rest, but we're talking a very large group. 800 species minimum for bats, 800 species for the rest. Some have tails, all kinds of different sizes. 2 groups, one eats insects, one we have, and then the fruit-eating bats down in the tropics. Different issue altogether. They fight bats to protect their bananas. Do that. So they put the 90-foot sulfate over the banana tree. So I was in the Caribbean at some point, and every tree, banana tree has a cellophane and plastic over it during the night. That's a big one, and they grab it. So different issue with conservation and population control. This is what I'm going to call it. All right. So conservation for the northern limits, and then population control in other cases. Notice how I skipped the pangolin altogether. Very Indonesian, very occasional species, very specific. I'm sure nice papers on conservation as well. Carnivores, a very large group. We have all kinds of issues with carnivores. I want to check the time here. Good. So, I want to stop doing overviews all the time, and I really want to at some point get into the nitty-gritty of the management actions we take. So it's tough because some have been managed for 20 years. To summarize. And so I will look at the branch management papers that cover the site part of it, which is something you're doing in your, something I'm doing as well. I will be doing in class. We'll see how that goes. But for now, whenever any species comes to mind in the carnivores, what species, tentacle species. Wolverine cute.
Sure.
Wolverine is cute. That's a new one. That's pretty fantastic. Yeah.
Cats.
Cats, several species of cats, right? I mean, of course, we think of the cougar because we're not. Caracal and all. Pretty fascinating. All share common and the sea. That's where you need the biological system behind it. You have to know what group they belong to. Because the minute I say cat, I'm thinking old man reproduction. That's an issue. And domestic cats works really well because you can fight a couple of males, you'll get the female, get the whole night. But in lions and tigers, cheetahs, extremely complex. So they say that the lion has to mate or female will have those practice. All right, so very complex. That means of course there's other issues as well for all kinds of. So we start off with some in the very large carnivores, often all kinds of different strategies, right? The bear is very different from the cat, from the dog, from the weasels, and so on. For large group to examine and in terms of management, it's almost a case by case. So name another species other than
And polar bears?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What's the issue with the polar bears?
They're very vulnerable.
And what's happening to them right now?
Not lost.
Yeah. Habitat loss, just to keep it simple, habitat loss. They said it's still faster in other places in the world, so pretty tough. I was thinking that you want to grow the population of the tourists, but you know. Observe the polar bear. Anything else about the gray wolf? Anybody? No. Gray wolf is very important. It will remain among the endemic species. It happens that we're extremely large world distribution for gray wolf. And we have issues with the gray wolf. Need a couple of issues, and that's why this issue situation is still unresolved. Several aspects of it. So name one. Lindsay, you're right, two. Okay, you said it. You said it. You hope the question is to the C and then some three letters. Cute.
Persecution. Persecution.
Persecution for what reason?
People are afraid of them.
Yes. Is that reasonable or that they're afraid of the wolves? Is that reasonable?
No.
It's
No.
not reasonable?
No.
Can be, depending where you live.
And I suppose the wolf pack is the
Oh, how often do you hear about people getting attacked by wolves? Not very often.
no. No. And you're right. But it's still, there must have been cases, probably not in Canada, possibly not during these days, because we control much of the population. But Spain had wolves gone. It was covered with wolves gone, except the mountains where they know it's not. Europe was covered. All gone.
Was it touch
Persecution,
livestock?
and that's where it comes from. You want to talk persecution, they sure know how to do it. give me a firearm, give me a couple of cousins, or take the very last one. So they were vendettas, you know, I mean, they took off against the entire set of the problem. So that was persecution. I'm gonna say persecution, that's my point of view. You know, it's not science we're discussing here, the value, but persecution, no. But the risk, the fact that people are scared of it, I will say yes. There's just no way you can be, I mean, you can't be on the trail somewhere seeing a great wolf and walk by it. You want to walk by it. No. So, same for your dog, if you care for your dog, care for your cat, and so on and so on. And of course, they came in packs. The problem, you see one wolf, where the other ones turn around real quick. I have that situation. One trapper, he says, I'm going to cross this pond here, walking, and I'm gonna check that one last trap, and at the end of the day, so it's very good. So, I said, yeah, go ahead. I said, I have a headlamp, I'm good, you know, by the closet. I'll take a walk. And then as soon as he starts walking, the wolf pack starts howling just behind the hill where he was heading. It's not okay. I said, I guess the Sandvik, I got a Knox, and I'll be safe right here. So the whole entire time, I didn't know if the wolf pack was howling, didn't actually walk back to me. That's a little smaller, you know. Very scary. Very cool. So yeah, lots of stories on carnivores, as you can see. Are there, I mean, talk about bears, issues with bears. Of course, we're very famous for black bear situation, high densities and so on. But at the same time, there's a sun bear somewhere in the Himalayas that probably needs conservation. So then here they created a new group, and I haven't used that term before, so it's brand new, apart from the press. I used to use this term right here. I'm going to point to Artiodactyla, which means paired moose. So the moose model. But recently they really realized that the whales are very close to all of to the group of ungulates. So they couldn't help it but to put the whales right here and the ungulates together. And no, whales do not have hooves. So that big there. It happened that genetically they're very close. We haven't found the first swimming cow, I guess. The doe. And then the odd animals as well. So of course you can imagine right here in this group that there's all kinds of very different issues. I don't want to give you the classification. The whales, totally different issues from the cattle, for example. And then the horses as well. I don't see too many issues. Oh yeah, right here. So the rhinos, I guess, is worth pointing out. Rhinos situation with rhinos, anybody? One, yeah. Yeah. Yes. What's the value we give it? What do you think it's good for?
People use it for jewelry, I think medicinal purposes. As well.
In my simple mind, I was just going to say aphrodisiac. I get the feeling that the Asian market is very fond of any kind of substance. Have you seen it?
No, I just know that, like, ivors can be used for making necklaces and small trinkets and stuff, so I'm assuming that they can use it for charging as well.
Yep.
And so,
Yeah. And then it's yeah, it's a different form altogether from all the other horns. Yeah.
If it's made of wood, keratin? Do they not just like with their fingernails and use that instead?
Well, they're all made of keratin, so even the sheep has keratin on its horns, so
Then
it's
what's
all
so special
keratin,
about
but
their
what you're talking about, the fact that it's grown in hair, so it's a bunch of hair together, so. Yeah, but you can actually see the fiber, so it's fibrous instead of being just a little sheet, but your question was?
Well, I was just wondering what was so special about their keratin, like if they think
Yeah.
it has like a
It's a grow-
aphrodisiac power, then why not just like use your own keratin instead of?
Yeah,
putting-
no. The same, if the gallbladder has some virtues, don't go attacking your neighbor. No. You can bite your nails all you want, no, you're all excited. So, very brief coverage of, just again, as an eye opener, if if I want to dive into a specific paper at some point, it's good to have that as a background and see about what group we're looking at. So something I extracted from Wikipedia as well, I think it was worth mentioning as a very broad overview of the impacts we might have. Very broad as well, deforestation as well, so that means removing the wildlife directly. And then here is an interesting measure, somebody who actually figured out the biomass of wild mammals. I mean, you better get up early, but sure. Biomass of wild mammals on the planet. Yeah, your scale. 82% since the beginning of human civilization. That dates back, okay? So, but the trend is still something we want to care about. We want to know which direction that's going. Rhinoceros might become instinct primates, pangolins, giraffes. You can see where the exam would go with this, of course. You can you name a couple of species who are, according to Wikipedia, likely to more likely to be extinct. And pangolins, giraffes. Of course, you can talk about all kinds of the reasons why they decline. Remediation as well. So this again, it's so species specific that it's really hard to. Vertebrate population declined by 68% since 1970. So that's quite spectacular. Notice that we're not looking at biomass, we're looking at population. So it's actually an actual estimate of the count of the animals, so regardless of their size. Overconsumption is one of them. Not much that we can do. Population growth is human population growth, of course. Nothing we can do about that too much. And then intensive farming is an issue. They come together, but this is going to be recurrent in the habitat destruction. The fact that we occupy more space and we need more food for more people before we cover more land, because we don't grow stuff on tree trunks. We have to use prairies. So, intensive farming. Again, such a bad place to be teaching anything about farming. I teach that at high school in Iowa. Oh my God. I mean, they take the bus and all they see is corn from their house all the way to school. That's all they're ever going to see. We're going to watch some good movies from the Midwest. And then, so it says right here that humans have triggered a sixth mass extinction. I thought I had somewhere a graph like this one. I'll go back to the text in a second. Just briefly, some suggestion of the number of taxa that went down. And this, on the Y scale here, it says percent of survival of large mammal species. Very specific, right? So we're not talking flies or smaller vertebrates, fish. For different events in 1,000 years. And that's long time, the scale is long right here, but 100,000 years in Africa, and then an event in Australia. It looks like we wasn't great. What happened there? You remember that story about Australia, right? And that's not very far. It's when England decided to colonize the world. They were rich, wanted to be even richer. Treasures like gold. Went to Australia, they dropped their goats, their domestic cats, all the way to the top. Sorry, they'll come back to the ship. Yeah, it never came back. So all kinds of species came in and destroyed many species. So that's the extinction of many species of marsupials right here. North America did the same thing, so possibly just harvest. And Madagascar, of course, is recent with the destruction of the forests. Many species and stuff. So I think the evidence is pretty clear. This is a continuation of the threats. Let's stop with this slide here. The meat issue, you've heard about it, you will keep talking about it. It's what you do with your land. Is it better to grow corn? Is it better to grow wheat? Is it better to grow cows? And all the vegetarian discussion is about, in one way, to try to refuse to overexploit the land with cows, because cows will require, say, 4 hectares of corn to be grown. So the cow is actually using a lot of the space. So that's the demand for meat makes a difference, because we have to take out the forest right here in order to grow corn for the cow, to feed the cow, or hay, right? And then, of course, habitat destruction. So growing demand for meat is something to keep in mind. Overhunting and poaching can be a problem. Ivory is one case of poaching. We could name 1,000. Doesn't take long. When you have people lose their jobs, and they'll start poaching very quickly. So that's rampant around the world. And then indirect actions. And this is a comprehensive list, but I want you to be able to list a few general actions that we might have on wildlife. So fishing gear, massive, because we just don't realize, because we're suffering, how much fish is being taken in, and how much fish is being dropped at the harbors